Hi, I'm Dr. Jawahar, David Jawahar, pulmonologist in Dover, Delaware. I just wanted to give an update on coronavirus to whoever is interested. And it's an evolving story, and I think I'm going to talk about it um, just as what I know, and some of them may be my opinions. Some of them are facts that's out there in literature. Hopefully, it's all evidence based. And so, this coronavirus it's been very popular now. Obviously, everybody is aware of it. Are a bunch of viruses originally found discovered in 1960s, and they're mainly the viruses of animals. They were found in cows, pigs, chickens, and birds, and now a lot of talk about bats and pangolins. So these animal viruses have somehow learned to jump onto human beings and create human diseases. For a while, it was all colds, common colds. Some of the common colds were caused by coronaviruses. And now, in the last couple decades, we're seeing some severe illnesses from these viruses. I think they're evolving. And so they're small, round viruses. They're really small, smaller than paint particles or smallest dust. It's almost like the smallest tobacco smoke, smaller than asbestos inhalations. And they're round, and they get their name from the protein spikes they have on their DNA, on their RNA. Um, um, the spikes around this round thing makes it look like a solar corona, um, like a crown. And it's an irony that now this virus is wearing a crown and it's dominating the entire world. And these small viruses, um, the coronavirus, the current one, the latest one, there are about 7, 8 of them which have jumped to humans, but the latest one is very similar to, the genetic material is very similar to the ones in bats and the ones that are found in pangolins. So there's a myth out there that some of the rich, wealthy Asians were consuming more and more pangolins. And China was actually importing a lot of pangolins, apparently. Um, and and these pangolins transmitted them to humans as a way of protecting themselves so that we are not consuming them and endangering them. But I don't know how much of that is true. But I also believe this climate change that we've had has created this virus evolve to survive. And rapid changes in temperature, up and down, one day hot, one day cold. So these viruses, the current virus, it it evolved to create a stronger spike, the proteins around it. The spike is able to attach to human host cells in the respiratory system stronger and more quickly and more powerfully. Uh, that shows that this is from natural selection and not really lab made. because lab made we wouldn't be so efficient to evolve into such a powerful infectious agent, I think. Anyway, so this, because of this ev- evolution, because of its capacity of its spikes to attach to our human cells, it is very contagious and very infectious. It's easy to catch it, but so it spreads fast. It wants to jump, wants to attach to some human host cells and replicate in them. So, um, so this came on this year, and apparently it was first identified in China in somewhere in early December, and now they're able to trace something back even before Thanksgiving in China, and so early December, and then they had this Chinese New Year festivities, and there were some cases adding up, and eventually New Year's Eve is when China reported, I think, to the WHO that this is um, something to be of concern and a new virus. And um, then we started seeing more and more cases. The first case in the United States apparently came to Seattle on January 15th. And and he was tested positive. A young man was tested positive on January 21st. And since then, we are noticing, obviously, everybody knows how many hundreds of thousands of cases we've had, and the worldwide, how it's increasing. But so this, since this is so contagious and infectious, it spreads fast. It keeps exponentially spreading, and that's why the curve is so steep. And so it is spread mainly by aerosol and droplets. And these aerosols from people coughing and sneezing and touching things, it's on surfaces, and we touch those surfaces and we touch our face. So the coronavirus is transmitted, from what we believe, is mostly from touching surfaces which have been spit on or coughed on. And so once this virus enters our respiratory system, it attaches, the spikes on it attaches to a receptor on our human respiratory system cells. And it could be anywhere, ciliated epithelial cells. And the receptor itself is identified as ACE2 receptor. And this receptor is very popular in another pulmonary disease called sarcoidosis. And it's also popular with the cardiologists because that receptor is where some of the blood pressure medications work. And this spike, it attaches to this receptor, and then another protein from our cell breaks it down, breaks the virus down, and then we engulf the virus into our cell. It kind of becomes together, the cell and the virus. And the virus starts to multiply and replicate using its our genetic material, our cell products, and it creates, and so to fight it, we create an immune response, and um, and we can contain it by our immunity. Sometimes we cannot contain it; it spreads even further. Sometimes the war between our immunity, the immune cells, and the antibodies that we produce, and the virus, the war itself creates a lot of havoc and a lot of destruction. And so it's so at various stages, it it has various phases, and so so there are several stages. There is a coronavirus infection, coronavirus disease, and coronavirus SARS. That's severe acute respiratory distress coronavirus 2 when it gets to that phase. And the interesting part about this disease, unlike flu, is flu, you're like boom. You get sick, you are down for a couple days, and goes really fast. Flu comes on really fast. This one is more like a gradual. You start having some fever, dry cough, fatigue, and it could become productive cough. You could have some abdominal symptoms like nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and then most patients it goes away. But prior to these initial symptoms, you could be asymptomatic, meaning like you could have gotten the infection but not the disease, but you might still be spreading it. And so 50% are asymptomatic apparently, asymptomatic and pre-symptomatic. And then you become symptomatic. So there is an incubation period. Once the virus comes onto us, it takes about 2 days to 14 days, maybe even longer than 14 days sometimes, but mostly within 5 days, you should start having some symptoms. Around 5 days is the median time. And so you get an infection, you get exposed, in 5 days you get some symptoms, and the symptoms are mostly mild, and but the symptoms could progress. It could progress to more in severity. So it's a gradual, systematic progression. So you start becoming more short of breath, and so day 1 to 3 you have mild symptoms. Day 3 to 5 you're getting more short of breath, more likely to get admitted to the hospital, and day 5 you start having low oxygen, and the oxygen is somewhat more out of proportion to what the X-ray or the CAT scan show. And then day 7 you mount a significant immune response, and then day 10 you're likely to get intubated. That's a rough thing. And so you it's a progression. So you can get aware. So you need to seek attention, and the attention you would in the first 3 days. Hopefully, it'll resolve with mild symptoms, and you should contain and self-isolate, and not give it to anybody else so that it doesn't keep spreading. But things are getting worse. Then you might want to seek medical attention. Mainly, the reason you might probably need oxygen support, and some medications as a supportive measure. And once you're hospitalized, about 1 in 5 people get hospitalized. 1 in 5. 1 in 5 who are infected with the corona infection. And then once you're hospitalized, there's a 35% chance of getting hospitalized into the ICU. And once you get into the ICU, you have a 50% mortality, roughly. 1 in 2 are dying, and once you get intubated and you're on a mechanical ventilator, very high chance of death, and it's a very prolonged stay. So average stay in the hospital for a coronavirus disease 19 is about 10 days, but if you're intubated, it could be 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and very high mortality if you're on a ventilator, more than 80% from what I'm hearing from multiple places and what we're seeing. And pretty bad disease. Um, but the fatality rate, if 100 people are getting infected with corona, um, about 1 to 3% is the mortality rate in general. So 1 to 3 people. But if you are above 85, it's a 15% chance almost, and of dying. And if you have cardiovascular disease, heart disease, about 10% mortality, and diabetes, about 7% mortality. And other high risks are people with lung diseases, about 6 to 7% mortality, and immunocompromised patients with cancer and everything like that. So it is pretty high, but not everybody who gets this. Even if you're having cardiovascular disease and diabetes, um, is about 15% mortality. But in general, I feel like as we test more, as the incidence is increasing and prevalence too, the mortality will be around, it'll end up, I believe, at around 1 to 2%. Um, higher than the flu, but um, not as scary as our financial shutdown and everything else that goes around it. Anyway, that said, what is the differential diagnosis of this thing? What are we missing? Some things are not adding up. It's the random, the community spread, the younger people, the healthcare workers, and it's sometimes random. It's not explained, not explainable. So, what could be the differential diagnosis? And we don't want to be too fixated. Obviously, we have to be very concerned and very dedicated to this. But one of the things I've been thinking about is our, the acute hypersensitivity pneumonitis has a very similar symptoms: fever, malaise, fatigue, cough, dry cough. And I say that because there are a lot of infiltrates which are on the periphery of the lungs, and usually you would think viruses are more central. And this acute hypersensitivity pneumonitis, I say that also because the polypropylene in the face masks could be could be what some people are hypersensitive to, and it could be a serious condition also if it is not addressed. The other things we should also be concerned about are co-infections, like other viruses on top of this, and chlamydia infections, mycoplasma infections, and of course super added infections like bacterial infections. And I feel we've seen these cases, and I've treated myself with Z-Pak and prednisone, and some of them have recovered faster, and some people sometimes have said, I've had this cough for 3 weeks, 2 weeks, and this is the worst bronchitis I've ever gotten. And Z-Pak and prednisone worked, at least in my experience sometimes. These were not COVID positive, proven though. This was before. And so that's something to keep in mind before it's too late, the differential diagnosis, because we can help some of these with medications. And let's not forget flu too. It is still happening, flu B especially. Anyway, the treatments, supportive, oxygen, high flow oxygen, and ventilator management. So some of the treatments which are being, which we could the antibodies against the virus so that these spikes don't attach to our host cells. And how do we do that is currently convalescence plasma from people who have had this infection, and we give it to other patients. Maybe that's one option. And maybe a vaccine which creates antibodies. That is it's being in clinical trials. And we can immunomodulate. We can control the immune response that we have to this virus so that the war between the virus and our immune response is not causing so much of disease throughout our body. And some of these immunomodulators are hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin and interferons and the other treatment mechanism is just preventing the replication of the virus by inhibiting the RNA polymerase itself. And remdesivir is another medication that's been in trials. There's several other things that trials are going on. But these are the three approaches: antibodies, immunomodulation, and preventing the viral replication itself. But that said, it's a challenging scenario, and let's keep. It's an evolution. It's a challenge for everybody. It takes time, and I think once we have more. The pandemic of H1N1 went on for quite a while, and it started in March of 2009, and went on all the way till for several months. It wasn't as bad as this, but the thing about the other viruses were the antibodies that we generated against them didn't last that long. So even if we come up with a vaccine, we're not sure it's going to be good forever. The good thing about this virus is apparently there's only 2 strains of it, and unlike the flu, which keeps evolving much faster. Hopefully this coronavirus doesn't keep evolving like the flu. Then it'll be harder for the vaccines to work also, or we have to keep changing the vaccines according to the strain. And I think we will win, and God is good and God is great. Hopefully this helps some people and some patients to understand the disease. And thank you for listening. Take care.